So what are the top 5 mistakes realtors make when challenging low appraisals? Number 1, miscalculating dollar per square foot. Number 2, not understanding linkages and incorporating it into their market research. Number 3, not looking for market time adjustments. Number 4, submitting reconsiderations of value that lack specificity. Number 5, not understanding some of the adjustments appraisers have to make for unique amenities. And bonus, not having a preferred lender that also has an appraisal license. But stay tuned, I'm gonna break each one of these down in detail so the next time you have to challenge an appraisal, you might have a fighting chance. So number 1, price per square foot. So price per square foot is a really reliable tool when trying to determine how much it might cost to build a home, but it's a little less reliable when trying to determine the values of properties. When trying to determine the value of a property, we have to make adjustments for the different amenities between the properties. In addition, the way a realtor would typically calculate price per square foot varies quite a bit from the way an appraiser would do it. Let's say, for example, we have 4 comparable sales in the same neighborhood. The first property is 1,900 square foot and sold for $288,000. The second property is 2,050 square foot and sold for $313,000. The third property is 2,100 square foot and sold for $317,000. And the last property is 2,500 square feet and sold for $364,000. Now we can do some simple math and come up with an average price per square foot of $149.94. So if our subject property is 2,400 square foot, it'd be very reasonable for a real estate agent to come up with a proposed value of $360,000. But is that really what the data is showing us? Let's take a deeper look. If we take a deeper look, we see that the price per square foot is pretty consistent between 1,900 and 2,100 square feet. But when we look at comp number 4, we see that there's a significant difference in price per square foot. So what this data is really telling us is that between 1,900 and 2,100 square feet, the market is typically willing to pay about $151.74 a foot. Now, if we multiply that number by 2,100 square feet, we get a proposed value of $319,000. Now, what can we infer about comp number 4 given this data? Well, we see that comp number 4, even though 400 square feet bigger, only sold for $364, which means that additional 400 square feet in space only increased the value by about $45,000. And if we calculate the price per foot for those 400 square feet, we come up with $113.39. So if we segment out the square footage of our subject property and we use both these values accordingly, then we'll come up with an estimation of value of around $353,000. Now, it's important for you to understand this isn't just some kind of weird math. Rather, this is a reflection of what the market is actually telling you. The data shows that up to a certain point, people are willing to pay about $151 a foot. But once the home gets bigger than that, the market isn't willing to pay as much for that additional square footage. Now, in this example, the difference is only $7,000, about 2% of sales price. But in reality, I've seen this misunderstanding of price per square foot create much bigger gaps in sales price and appraised value. So it's important for you to understand how this works when determining your list price, your offer price, and reviewing an appraisal that maybe didn't come in where you wanted it to. Number 2, linkages and how they should impact your market research. Often when doing CMAs or looking for comps, realtors will try to stay within the subdivision, but it's important to understand that appraisers will look at an entire neighborhood. And a neighborhood is a block of subdivisions and commercial areas that are connected by the same linkages. So what exactly are linkages? Well, easy. Hospitals, doctor's offices, schools, grocery stores. If there's a recent sale that's not necessarily in the same subdivision as your property, but it shares an abundance of linkages, it very well might end up being a comp that's used on the appraisal. Which is why it's so important when you do your market research that you cast a wider net and you look for more of these properties that might share linkages with your property. Rarely, if ever, should you be completely surprised by one of the comparables that's been included on the appraisal report. If you use linkages when doing your market research, you'll get an idea of all the properties that could potentially help or hurt your valuation. Number 3, market time adjustments. This is arguably one of the most underused adjustments, while simultaneously in this market being one of the most important adjustments that an appraiser could make. A market time adjustment is an adjustment that factors in the amount of time that has passed since a comparable has sold. For example, Suppose you have a comparable sale on an appraisal report that sold for $350,000 and it's been 5 months since that property sold. Let's also assume that property values in that area have increased by 14% over the last 12 months. Well, at that rate of appreciation in 12 months' time, that property would have gained another $49,000 in value. That would equate to an appreciation rate of approximately $4,083 a month. So if it's been 5 months since that property is sold, it's reasonable to assume that that property would sell for about $20,000 more today. This adjustment can be critical in getting you a credible opinion of value, especially in a market environment where home prices are increasing rapidly. Number 4, reconsiderations of value that lack specificity. Does this scenario sound familiar? You get an email from the lender saying, hey, appraisal came in low, here's a copy of it, tell me what you want to do. I'm sure you've been there before. It can be super frustrating and the lender never offers to help you. And to be completely honest with you, most lenders lack the expertise to help you anyway. So you go scouring through MLS to find as many comps as you can that you think will support your contract price, and you send them to the lender and say, hey, we want a reconsideration of value. I'm going to clue you in on a little secret. Appraisers hate this. You're just wasting their time. They already combed through MLS to find all the potential comps and narrowed it down to the ones that they think would be the most appropriate. What you're doing is making more work for them, work that they may or may not even do. When you submit a reconsideration of value, you need to be specific about what it is in the appraiser's report that you're challenging. Do you think one of the comps should have had a market time adjustment, for example? Do you think you found a more appropriate comparable that should be swapped out with one of the ones included in the report? And why do you think that comp leads to a more credible result than maybe one of the other ones that the appraiser decided to use? Is there some other deficiency you found in the appraisal report, like perhaps an error in square footage? Or are there other adjustments that you think are missing or maybe lower or higher than they should be? When we do a reconsideration of value, we want to be very specific about what we want the appraiser to take a second look at. Otherwise, we're kind of just pitching wishing stones in a lake and hoping that something works out in our favor. But the reality is we're more likely to just upset the appraiser and not really get anywhere. Number 5, adjustments. Now, we don't have time to talk about every adjustment that can be made on an appraisal report, but I want to talk about a few that seem to be the source of a lot of confusion. The first is bedrooms. Bedroom adjustments are typically something you're only going to see on smaller properties. Once you start getting to bigger homes, 4 bedrooms plus, you're not likely to see much of anything by way of an adjustment for bedroom count. Swimming pools. This is a big one, and this should help you educate your clients if you're doing a listing that has a swimming pool. Again, there's a big difference between cost and value. Cost is how much do I have to spend to acquire this thing. Value is what is the market willing to pay for it. When trying to determine the value add of a swimming pool, appraisers use a technique called paired sales analysis. And paired sales analysis is when I'm looking at properties that are pretty much the same with the exception of a specific amenity that I'm trying to determine the value of. So let's say, for example, I have 2 properties that are in the same neighborhood. And they're both 4-bedroom, 3-bath properties, both within 100 square feet of each other. They're both within a year of the same age. Everything is pretty much the same with these properties, except one has a swimming pool and one does not. And let's say that the property without the swimming pool sold for $370 and the property with the pool sold for $395. Well, through the process of paired sales analysis, we can identify that, hey, these 2 properties that are virtually the same in this area, with the exception of one having a swimming pool and one didn't, sold for a $25,000 difference. So what that tells us is that the market in that area is willing to pay approximately $25,000 more for a house that has a pool than it would for a home that does not. Now, it doesn't matter how fabulous the pool is and if the homeowner spent 80 grand to have the pool built. What the data is telling us is that the market in this area will only pay about 25 grand extra to have a swimming pool. Now, generally speaking, an appraiser is going to use more than 2 properties to do this paired sales analysis, but I'm just kind of giving you a basic breakdown of how it works. But this is how they figure out what the potential value add of a specific amenity is to a property. And that's how swimming pools will be valued. And the last one I'm going to talk about is workshops. And this is crucial for all you listing agents out there. If you are selling a property that has a workshop, it can be really hard, if not impossible, to find a comparable property that also has a comparable workshop. Oftentimes, appraisers will have to rely on a method called the cost approach to determine what the value add of a workshop is. So what does that mean for you as a listing agent? Well, it means that you need to help get the appraiser the data he needs to give you the best value add possible for that workshop. What's in it? How old is it? Any information you can give about the quality and type of construction can be really helpful when they try to determine how much it would cost to rebuild that structure and then depreciate for how old it is. I would highly advise that you try to get this information to the appraiser the moment it gets assigned versus waiting until you get the appraisal report back and then trying to use that information to request a reconsideration of value. And lastly, here's a bonus tip. Get yourself a preferred lender that actually knows appraisals. Now, the most important principle in mortgage lending is the 4 C's, and the 4 C's will determine which loans can close and which loans can't. Now, I want to take just a moment to talk about what the first 3 C's are. A home shopper has to have the credit to qualify, they have to have the capacity to repay the loan, and they have to have the capital to cover the closing costs and the down payment. But that 4th C is collateral, and collateral is the property itself. And everything that is important as it pertains to the collateral will be dictated by the appraisal report. Now, I'm sure your preferred lender is an expert on the first 3 C's. If they weren't, they wouldn't be your preferred lender. But mortgage underwriters don't just care about 3 of the C's, they care about all 4 C's. And you need a mortgage lender that has a level of knowledge in all 4 C's to where they can help you hurdle any obstacle that comes along and get your deal to the closing table. I got my appraisal license simply so I could be a better resource to the referral partners that I work with, and I'm standing by to help you too.